ChessFest number 9. This is great. This is where we start putting things together. We'll walk through 3 short games here so you can learn about check and checkmate and start to take a look at some opening strategy. Let's set up the board together. I have the first and second ranks down where I am here, first and second ranks, so I'll be playing white. And opposite me are the 7th and 8th ranks. That's where we'll set up black. So let's set up white first. Start with your king and queen. Remember, queen takes her own color. They go in the center. Next to our royalty come the bishops. Flanking them are our knights. And in the corners are rooks. And as we know, our pawns take the row in front of the major pieces. Same thing for black. King and queen in the center. Queen taking her own color, so that means black queen on a black square. Bishops beside royalty. Knights on B and G. Be good, knights. And then our rooks in the corners. Pawns in front of the major pieces for black on the 7th rank. And now we're ready to begin. We're just going to walk through a game, just a 6-move game that ends in checkmate. This is a game from 1802, and it features an opening that's not played much anymore called Bird's Opening. So let's dive right into it. I'll go pretty quickly, so you might need to pause the video to look at the moves here. All right, white will start with F4. So white's first move is F4. Remember, if I don't tell you what piece to move, it's a pawn. So if I just say F4, naming a square, it's a pawn. So F4 is white's first move. Look at the 2 squares that it's attacking. At least one of those squares there, E5, is a square in the center. And that's something you want to do. You want to try to control the center of the board. If you can control the center of the board, then it's hard for your opponent to get his pieces through to attack. So controlling the center of the board is point number 1 of opening strategy. And we'll have a whole separate lesson on that. I just want to drop that in your ear now. Black responds with E5. So again, I didn't say what piece, so it's a pawn. So find E5. And it's going to be the E-file pawn who moves there. He's the only one who can get there, right? Because pawns move forward. So F4 was white's first move, and black followed up with E5. If you're playing white, you see what you can do there, right? And black is offering that. He's not unaware. But you can do FX E5 so that your F pawn, the one you have out there, can capture on E5. FX E5, capture pieces, go inside the board. Not to be touched until the end of the game. Thank you very much. Black, D6 is your response, which is a little questionable because you're offering a second pawn exchange when you haven't made up for the first one. But in any case, white goes ahead and captures that pawn, EX D6. So white's looking good here, huh? Black, though, can take out that bishop now. You see how his dark square bishop is right in line diagonally with that pawn. Bishops move diagonally. So take your F bishop, black, your dark square bishop, and slide along that diagonal to enact BX D6. That's a capital B for bishop there. That's the only little thing in writing a game that might get confusing. BX D6, capital B for bishop captures on the square D6. Now, look at things here. Who's doing better? Looks like black has a little bit more development, although white is up a pawn. But white really has nothing out or developed, just has this hole here over on F2, which we will learn, we will refer to as the weak F2 square. At the beginning of a game, F2 and for black F7 are weak squares. All right, ready. G3 is white's response. G3, so I didn't say what piece, so it's a pawn on the G file. And he's just moving out the 1 square there to G3. Not all the way to G4, which he could, but he just moves into G3. Black responds with Queen G5, taking out the big guns. Now, this normally isn't something you do this early in the game, but I think by now black has figured out that white is not playing too well. So he slides that queen out the diagonal to G5. Black plays Queen G5. White responds with Knight F3. which looks nice, right? What is that knight doing there? That's right, he's threatening the queen. If you look at where the knight is, from f3, 1, 2, and over, he could take the queen. But the black has something very interesting in mind here. He notices something. In chess, you hear people talk about, oh, I can think 6 moves ahead, or 8, or 20 moves ahead. I don't think anybody really does that. You can do that and go through exchanges and such in your head, but you can't really plan quite that far ahead and know exactly what your opponent will respond. But you do need to think 1.5 moves ahead. And that's what black is doing here, and I won't tell you quite what just yet. You'll see. Black does something that seems like a total blunder, but it's not. His black queen here is under attack. He's going to slide her down and capture the pawn on g3. Now, there's a lot with this move we're going to look at right here. So that's qx g3 check. And you see how we write a check is with a plus sign. qx g3 check. Now that the check means that the black queen is attacking the white king. Now remember when we first did kings, it was the first piece we took out. Remember, they couldn't be right next to each other. They couldn't be one square away from each other. And the reason for that is you'd be putting yourself in check. Check means the king is under attack. That's what a check is. So black would actually say check. I don't think it's really required, but it's polite to say check so that your opponent is well aware. White now has to get out of check. No matter what white does, he must get out of check. You cannot do something else and stay in check. Because then on the next move, black would capture the king. No, that doesn't happen in chess. White must get out of check. And there are generally 3 ways to get out of check. You can move your king, but you really don't want to do that unless you have to, depending on the situation. You can move your king. You can block. You can put another piece in between you and the attacking piece. Or, if you're having a great day, you might be able to actually capture the checking piece. So 3 ways to get out of check. You move the king, you block, or you capture the checking piece. Generally, and there's always exceptions depending on the position, you want to do them in that reverse order. If you can capture the checking piece, that sounds good, right? Blocking is nice, usually sets up for a capture. And then if you have to, you move the king. Now, let's look at this here. White is in check, must get out of check. I see a lot of young players, they automatically move the king when they're in check. And then I'll say, oh, look, you could have taken his queen there. And they say, oh, I didn't see that. You have to take a moment and think of those 3 ways that you can get out of check. Move the king, block, or capture the checking piece. But let's go through it kind of in reverse order. Can white even move the king to a safe square? No, he can't. There's only one open square where he could potentially move the king, and that's f2, but that square is under attack by the black queen as well. So he actually couldn't move the king, can't move out of check. Could he block? In other words, could he put a piece between the checking piece and the king, between the black queen and the white king? Well, that square is f2, right? That's the square that's in between. Can white, now look at it before you answer, can white get any pieces there to f2? Nope, knight can't get there, bishop can't get there, pawns, queen, rook, nobody can get there. So he can't move the king, and he can't block, but he has to get out of check. Well, here's another avenue open to him, and that's to capture the checking piece. And can white do that? Yes, you got it. Take a look at that h-pawn there. Your h-pawn can capture the queen. So in this case, white has no options to choose from. He has one legal move. This is it. He can't do something else. There's no other move he could make. He must capture the queen with the pawn. And this seems like a disaster for black. Remember, your queen is your most powerful piece worth 9 points. So white, go ahead and do that hxg3. which looks like black just made a terrible blunder. And that's what we call a mistake in chess, a big one. We call it a blunder. That looks like a blunder, doesn't it? But watch what black has up his sleeve. This is brilliant. So now you know what check is. You're about to see what checkmate is. Black, take your dark square bishop there, currently on d6. Got him? Slide him along that diagonal and take that pawn on g3. So that's capital B, X, G3. And that, my friends, is checkmate. That is the end of the game. And you see we write that with the little hashtag tic-tac-toe number sign there, the two intersecting lines. But look at the checkmate position here. The black bishop is attacking the king from the same place where the queen was. And notice, we already know the king can't move out of check. We already know he can't block. And now that he's given up that h-pawn, he can't capture the checking piece either. This is checkmate, which means the king is dead. The game is over. This is the end of the game. And the way you'd write the score for a game is use two numbers separated by a dash. And it's either 0, 1, or 1/2 in the case of a draw, which we'll get to. But in this case, because black won the game, you write it as 0-1. That's the score for the game. 1 point for black. So white's score is written first, and black's score is written second. So this is a checkmate. This is the end of the game. Isn't it amazing? And it looks, from material, like white was winning, right? If you count up the points here, queen is worth 9, and pawns are worth 1. So how many points did white capture here with the queen and 2 pawns? 9, 10, 11, right? 11 points he captured, whereas black only captured 3 points. It looks like white is ahead, but the big lesson in this game too is that material is not everything. Your position matters at least as much, and pretty well more. Your position and what you're doing on the board. It's not all about material. Material matters, of course. It's nice to be up, what is he up here? How many points? 3, 11, 8. He's up 8 points. That seems very good. But obviously the position matters more because even though he's down 8 points, black still wins. So remember that. Another common mistake for young players is they just chase pieces all over the board, going for material, and they're never going for the mate. And that's a good way to lose. All right, reset your board, set everything back up the way it was at the beginning. We're going to play a second game here. You might be wondering, what is the shortest possible game you could play in chess? How many moves will be the shortest possible game? What do you think? Well, one move isn't going to do it, unless somebody just resigns, which would be bad sportsmanship. So it actually takes only 2 moves to effect a checkmate. And this is a famous thing that you need to know. It's called the fool's mate, because you'd have to be rather foolish to be on the losing side of this. Okay, so let's do the fool's mate. Here we go. White start off with f3. All right, moving that pawn out 1 square, the f-pawn. Black answers with e5. So take your e-pawn, move him out 2 squares to e5. White responds with g4. Taking his g-pawn, moving him up 2 squares to g4. And here comes the mate. Black, queen h4, mate. And again, you see we use that number sign, the tic-tac-toe there, to mark a checkmate. But look at the position. Can he move the king out of check? No. No place he can go. F2 is the only open square again, and that's on the diagonal with the queen, so it wouldn't take him out of check. And you have to get out of check when you're in check. Can he block? No, there's no piece he could put on either F2 or G3 to block the check. Can he capture the checking piece? Nope, 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 and no, he can't. This is the fool's mate over in 2 moves. If you're ever playing white, F3, G4 is not a good way to start your game. Let's do one more game so you can see what checkmate looks like. Reset your board. This is another very well-known exercise But unlike the fool's mate, which I've certainly never seen in a real game, I have seen variations, at least on the scholar's mate, happen in real games with students. So this is one you really want to know inside and out and understand. They actually start off a little more intelligently. White begins with e4. And that's a good central pawn opening. It's the most common opening in chess, e4 as the first move for white. And that does work to help control the center, right? And look at it also. See your light square bishop? He can now get out, right? He has that whole diagonal open to him. And your queen, too, has a diagonal open. So this move, e4, helps to control the center and opens the diagonals for your bishop and queen. So good move so far. Black responds with e5, which is a very acceptable response to e4. Does very similar things for black. It stops the progress of that white pawn, right? That white e4 pawn can't move now. And it opens up the diagonals for the black bishop and queen there. You see that? And he's working to control the center by attacking two central squares. Now, here's where things change a little bit. White does a bishop c4. Now, before you grab a bishop, notice that only one of your bishops can move, white, right? It's your light square bishop. And if you look at c4, it's a light square. So bishop c4, please take your light square bishop and slide him along that diagonal to c4. And don't worry if you find bishops a little confusing. It's actually very common that it's difficult for beginners to envision the moves, and it'll just take some practice. And that's what we're doing right now. Black responds with bishop c5. So find c5. It's a dark square. It means your dark square bishop, which is the only one who can get out now anyway, is going to slide along that diagonal to c5. So black plays bishop c5. Who do you think is going to win? It's coming up soon, sooner than you think. White responds with queen h5. So slide your queen along her diagonal to h5. Now look at white's bishop and queen. There is one square that they are both attacking. Do you see it? Yeah, f7. You see that? They're both honing in on f7. And didn't I call that the weak f7 square? You're about to see why. Black responds with knight f6. So black, find f6. Only one of your knights can get there. Remember, knight is the only piece that can travel over other pieces, so he can hop out no problem to f6. And that looks like a good move, doesn't it? He's attacking the queen. You don't like that queen up there this early in the game. You want to chase her away. But he makes a fatal mistake. He leaves that diagonal open there. And so white's response, qxf7, is checkmate. And if you look at the position, you see why the king cannot move. Both f8 and e7, the only two squares open to him, are still attacked by the queen. He cannot block because the queen is right next to him. There's no intervening squares where he could put a piece. And he can't capture the queen either. If you can't move your king, you can't block, you can't capture the checking piece, you are done. That is checkmate. This is called the scholar's mate. And we'd write this victory as 1-0. That's how we'd write the score, because white won this time. So white's score comes first, dash, black score 1-0. A victory for white. Well, hopefully you have the basics now on what check is. The king is under attack and must get out of check. And then when he can't get out of check, that is a checkmate, or just mate for short. So take these games and play through them a few times and see what they're doing wrong. One thing you can do with these games is say, play the scholar's mate, and then ask yourself, before white makes that final move, what could black have done differently instead of knight f6 to save the game there? What could he have done differently? Try playing through those, and we'll see you next time on ChessFest Academy.